Acoustic treatment. If you've seen pictures or videos of music studios, you would have seen a whole bunch of foam stuff dotted about on the walls, dotted about in the corners, and this stuff is called acoustic treatment. Simplistically, it's designed to reduce echo in the room or reverberation, but there's an awful lot of misunderstandings out there about this stuff, and so in this video, I shall give you the 5 biggest misconceptions in order of most common. Number one, more is better. Incorrect. More is not always better. Now, the misconception goes like this. The idea of acoustic treatment is to reduce echo, reduce reverberation in the room, and therefore, the more I can reduce, the more echo I can reduce, the more reverberation I can reduce, the better. Wrong. Incorrect, though. If you want a perfectly dry sound, if you don't want any room in what you're hearing, you need to be using headphones. That is the only way to completely remove the effect of the room. Even if you spend 200 grand making a room from scratch, buying the most expensive, building rooms within rooms, buying the most expensive acoustic treatment, buying all the bits and the bobs for £200,000, it will not completely remove the effect of the room. The only way to completely remove the room and hear a perfectly dry, most accurate representation of what you're creating is to use headphones. Short of literally building an anechoic chamber looking something like that, short of building one of those, the room will always play an impact, and therefore the end goal of acoustic treatment is not a perfectly reverb-free room, but instead a reverb dampened room. If this is a cave and this is an anechoic chamber, so lots of reverb, no reverb, you want to be somewhere in the middle. Maybe closer to the anechoic chamber, but definitely not all the way. Reverb is a part of how we experience the world. Whenever we're in a room, wherever we're in a space, we're hearing reverb, so it's not a bad thing. It's only a problem when there's a big obvious echo, and that big obvious echo is interfering with how we're hearing the music. If we're trying to dial in the reverb on a snare, for example, and all we're hearing is the reverb from the room, then it will obviously be quite hard to dial in the reverb on the snare. And so you want to dampen the room, but you don't need to completely dampen the room. Boink! All of which relates to point number 2. Misconception 2. Now, this is more of an implicit misconception. People don't really talk about it, but they kind of subconsciously think it's true. The misconception is acoustic foam, such as this, or the stuff in the corner. The misconception is that this absorbs all frequencies. Absolutely doesn't. Yes, of course, people kind of realize this. If you ask them, does acoustic foam completely reduce all frequencies? They would probably say no. But what people don't quite realize is that in all normal situations, in all normal rooms, short of spending silly money, it does basically nothing to the bass. Basically nothing. I mean, like literally nothing. You could literally build a room with like this much acoustic foam everywhere, like floor, ceiling, corner, just literally a foam room, a room of foam, way more foam than you could possibly imagine. And if you filled the room with like literally like a foot of foam or whatever, the whole way around the room, the bass would still effectively have a reverb. Yes, most of the, well, pretty much all of the mid and the high frequencies would be dampened, but the bass would still bounce around the room, and that, of course, would give you all the problems that you may have at least heard about bass, such as you sort of move your head around the room, the bass sounds some frequencies completely different. So in some rooms, for example, 46 hertz could sound extremely loud here, but say here could sound almost, or maybe even entirely non-existent. So in all practical circumstances, think of acoustic foam as only reducing reverb for the low mids, depending on how you define low mids. We'll go for low-ish mids. Low-ish mids up to high frequencies. Yes, it can affect those frequencies, but it will absolutely not affect all those low bass frequencies. Fancy physics. Be curious on how much foam you need. Difficult. Which, of course, relates to point 1, because in point 1 I said more is not always better, and that's because even if you literally maxed out your room, if you maxed out your room with acoustic treatment, it still wouldn't completely remove the reverb, and so you would still need headphones to get that perfect dry sound. Misconception number 3. You need fancy acoustic foam. Incorrect. You do not need fancy acoustic foam. In an ideal world, of course, get fancy acoustic foam. Generally works up to the limits of physics, of course. Like for the low frequencies, obviously, it does basically nothing. However, you don't really necessarily need that much, because if you have other stuff in the room, if you have other things in the room, such as just bits and bobs and chaos and stuff, then you don't actually necessarily need as much acoustic foam as you might think. For proof of this, imagine, or even if you haven't done this yourself, look at videos of people viewing empty houses, listen for the reverb, and then listen to people just walking in a normal house with a bunch of stuff. So you've got a fridge, sofa, just anything, candle. Just, you've been to a house before. You're probably in one now. In an empty house, even a non-music producer can hear a bit of an echo as they talk and walk about rooms and stuff. But once the rooms are full of stuff, chairs, keyboards, tripods, cables, bits and bobs. You've seen bits and bobs. Once the room is full of stuff, curtains, carpet, lamp, shade. Once the room is full of stuff, you need much less acoustic treatment than you might actually realise. It's kind of bananas, actually. So, I mean, if let's say you're still producing in your bedroom or the living room, there's a good chance, because you have a bed in there or a sofa or curtains and just like stuff and maybe some books, some books you like and other things, there's a good chance you might not actually need any acoustic treatment. All the stuff in the room is actually absorbing and diffusing sound. And some sound, and some sound. Bounce around. Loosely speaking, of course. I mean, it probably doesn't go in that direction, but you know what I mean, right? The sound, I mean, just look over there. For example, if you're a sound wave and you fly across the room, then as you hit all that, you're going to get sort of spread around in different directions. It's a combination of absorbing and diffusing. Absorbing sound, but diffusing, spreading it back. Remember, they are the two main types of acoustic treatment: absorbing and diffusing, kind of achieving the same result in two different ways. So maybe instead of spending loads of money and sort of having an acoustically treated room, maybe just spend a small amount on acoustic treatment and instead buy some sofas, or some nice curtains, or some lampshades, or some candles, or pretty much anything to increase the vibe. You have wood floors, maybe get a rug. Buy a nice, beautiful rug. The rug will not only be beautiful and nice to walk on barefoot, but it will also absorb some of the sound. Misconception 4. If you have the room set up absolutely perfectly, you have just the right amount of acoustic treatment to dampen the reverb, to dampen the echo, but there's still a little bit of room. It's that perfect balance, everything's set up just perfect. You've got the monitors in the scientifically most accurate distance from wall to wall, and you've got your little triangle sorted, and it's absolutely perfect. You spend all the money in the world, or even just a little bit, but it's absolutely perfect. The misconception is that perfect room, the misconception is that if you then get your mix or master to sound perfect in that room, it will sound perfect, or at least as good as possible, for everybody else. Wrong, incorrect again. This is a big misconception. If you make the mix sound as good as possible in your perfect room, that does not mean it's as good as possible for everybody else. There is no such thing as a perfect reproduction of your track. Even if you get, say, the most expensive headphones in the world, or even just the best music production, these ones. Even if you get the best headphones for music production, these ODs, I don't know what they're up to, these ones, even if you have these, if you make your track sound as good as possible on these guys, that simply does not mean it will sound good everywhere else. In fact, there's quite a strong argument that if you do make your track sound as good as possible on a perfectly flat set of headphones or a perfect room, you will almost certainly be adding too much subtle distortion, too much subtle reverb, compensating for how clean and perfect the headphones are. Remember, normal speakers and normal rooms, these add subtle distortions and the room adds subtle reverb. So it's just not as simple as buying a perfect set of headphones or making the perfect room and making your track sound as good as possible with those. Whenever you do any sound design, any mixing, any mastering, you have to be thinking about the end user and how they're going to be hearing your track. What playback platform are they listening through? Spotify, a DJ, vinyl? What sort of speakers will they use? Will they use monitors? Will they use headphones, a PA system, a car, telephone, whatever it is? Don't just think about the file you're creating. You need to be thinking about how that file is actually going to be sort of converted into noise, converted into sound as the end user is hearing it. And also actually the mindset of the listener too. Are they actively listening or are they passively listening? Leave that for another day. It's not about making the track sound as good as possible in your studio, because to be honest, almost nobody listens in a studio. And finally, misconception 5, acoustic treatment is not soundproofing. Apart from maybe the type that is. Yes, you can soundproof a room, and I suppose that could kind of fall under the category of acoustic treatment, but all the stuff you see, all those things you see on the walls, all those things you see in the corners, These are not, categorically not, soundproofing. Soundproofing needs to be built into the walls, whereas the acoustic treatment you normally see, this is purely designed to reduce reverb. And there you go. 5 misconceptions about acoustic treatment. My name has been Multiplier, and I will catch you guys. Catch you guys on the... Need to make a thumbnail. Does that look good? I have no idea. I think I should get closer. Thumbnail. I reckon it might look cool over here, but I'm still the other. I haven't moved the tool. I'm just using the tripod as a spinny device. Oh, I reckon that might be the angle. Thumbnail. Ooh, get down low. That's what she said. What? Oh, stop bumping into. Ah! Thumbnail. Nails of thumb. Thumbnail. I reckon I got it somewhere. Hopefully, if you've seen. Yeah, flippy flip.